It was supposed to be a quiet weekend getaway. Just me, my girlfriend Sarah, and our friends Jack and Emily. We had rented this old cabin in the mountains, secluded from the world, where no one could hear us partying until dawn. Jack and I split the cost. It wasn't exactly cheap, but the place had a hot tub and there was something appealing about staying in a cabin that felt older than our grandparents. When we first pulled up, I could tell Sarah was a little creeped out. She didn't say it, but I knew her well enough to catch that brief hesitation before she stepped out of the car. The cabin looked like something out of a horror movie. Gray wood, weathered from years of harsh winters, and windows that felt like eyes peering down at us. It was nestled against a forest, and the trees, tall and twisted, looked as if they were protecting something. "Babe, you okay?" I asked, nudging her as we unloaded the cooler from the car. She smiled, brushing her hair behind her ear. "Yeah, it's just spooky, that's all." Jack, of course, was already hyping the place up. "This is gonna be epic. We've got booze, a hot tub, and zero cell reception. It's perfect." Emily laughed, wrapping her arms around Jack from behind. Just what we needed, a break from reality. I grabbed the bags and headed inside, pushing the creaky door open. The cabin smelled like old wood and dust, as if it had been closed up for years. Inside, it wasn't much better. Old furniture, a stone fireplace, and weird animal heads mounted on the walls. The kind of place you'd expect to have a few secrets hidden away. "Not bad," Sarah said as she set our bags down on the dusty couch. "Kinda charming, in a creepy way." It didn't take long for us to settle in. Jack found a stash of old firewood outside, and we got a fire going in the fireplace while the girls unpacked the food. We cracked open the first of many beers, and soon the cabin started to feel cozy. There was something intoxicating about being so far from everything. Just us, and the sound of the wind whistling through the trees. But then Jack found the door. It was small, almost hidden behind a cabinet in the hallway. I wouldn't have noticed it if Jack hadn't pointed it out while he was exploring the place, already a couple of drinks deep. "Dude, check this out." Jack gestured towards the door, his eyes gleaming with the excitement of someone about to break a rule. "I think it leads to the basement." I stood beside him, peering at the door. It had an old, rusty padlock on it. I swear it was the one part of the cabin that looked clean, like someone had locked it recently. "We should leave it alone," Sarah said from behind us, her voice firm. "There's probably nothing down there, just storage or something." "Or something," Jack echoed, smirking. "Come on, let's find the key. It's probably just old junk. What's the worst that could happen?" I felt that same uneasy feeling crawl up my spine, the same one I'd felt when we first pulled up to the cabin. "Let's just chill, man. The place already gives me the creeps." Jack shrugged, but I could tell he wasn't going to let it go. Not yet. We spent the next few hours unwinding, cranking up the music and pouring out the whiskey. The hot tub beckoned, steam rising into the cold night air, and it didn't take much convincing to get Sarah and Emily into their bikinis. We slipped into the bubbling water, our bodies instantly relaxing as the warmth soaked through us. There was a buzz in the air, alcohol mixing with the secluded setting, a kind of freedom that only comes with being miles away from the nearest person. Sarah pressed up against me, her legs brushing mine under the water, while Jack and Emily weren't shy about their own flirtations on the other side of the tub. Every now and then, Jack would make some joke about the locked door, teasing us about what might be inside, but mostly we let it go. For a while it was perfect. But later that night, after the fire had burned low and the hot tub jets had been switched off, the door came back. I was lying in bed with Sarah, the alcohol humming through my veins when I heard it. A faint scratching sound. At first I thought it was the wind or some animal outside, but then I realized it was coming from inside the cabin, from the hallway, from behind that door. Sarah stirred beside me. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded, my pulse quickening. I threw on a shirt and crept out into the hallway, the floorboards creaking under my feet. Jack and Emily were still asleep, passed out in the next room. The scratching continued, faint but constant, like something, or someone, was trying to get out. Without thinking, I grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen and walked toward the door. It was ridiculous, I knew that. There was no basement, no one had lived here for years. But the sound was real, and it was getting louder. Suddenly the door rattled, hard enough that I stumbled back. My heart slammed in my chest as the old wood shuddered in its frame. Something was pushing against it, from the other side. "Jack, get up!" I yelled, my voice cracking with panic. Jack burst out of the bedroom, groggy and annoyed. "What the hell, man?" "The door," I said, breathless. "There's something behind it." He scoffed, running a hand through his hair. "You're freaking out over nothing. It's an old cabin, man. Probably some animal got stuck down there." He grabbed the toolbox we found in the kitchen earlier and approached the padlock. I tried to stop him, but before I could say anything, he'd popped it open. The door swung open with a groan, revealing a steep, narrow staircase leading into pitch blackness. The smell hit us first, damp, musty, like rotting wood and earth. But there was something else too, a sweet, sickly smell that made my stomach turn. "I'll check it out," Jack said, grabbing the flashlight from my hand. "Don't," Sarah warned from the hallway. She stood behind me, clutching her robe tight, fear written all over her face. But Jack didn't listen. He descended the stairs, the flashlight beam cutting through the dark. Emily stood beside Sarah, her arms wrapped around herself. I waited, tension knotting my muscles, but Jack didn't come back. Seconds ticked by, each one slower than the last. Then the scream. It wasn't Jack's voice. It was high-pitched, distorted, inhuman. I watched as Jack bolted up the stairs, his face drained of color, eyes wild with fear. "We need to go. Now!" he gasped. But before we could process it, something followed him. A shadow, tall and twisted, rising from the darkness like smoke, but more solid, more real. Its long, bony fingers gripped the doorframe, and its head turned slowly, its hollow black eyes locking onto us. "What the hell is that?" Sarah screamed, backing away into the hallway. Jack stumbled past me, his flashlight tumbling out of his hand and rolling toward the open door. The beam illuminated the figure just enough for us to see its grotesque shape, skin hanging loose, mouth twisted into something that might have once been a grin. But it was its eyes, those black, empty pits, that paralyzed me. They weren't just staring. They were hungry. "We have to go," Emily shouted, pulling on Jack, but Jack was frozen, his feet rooted to the floor. Then, the thing took a step. A slow, deliberate step, and the floor creaked as if it were screaming in pain beneath the weight of it. The air turned cold, and with each breath I took, it felt like icy needles were stabbing my lungs. I grabbed Jack by the arm and yanked him, breaking his trance. "Move!" I shouted, and we all ran, sprinting down the narrow hallway like our lives depended on it, because they did. I could feel the cold breath of that thing behind us, hear its slow, dragging footsteps echoing through the cabin as it followed us. We burst through the front door, the cold mountain air hitting us like a shock. My heart was pounding in my ears, adrenaline pumping through my veins. We stumbled into the front yard, breathless, trying to regain some sense of control. But then the ground beneath us shuddered. I turned back toward the cabin, the old structure groaning as if something massive was moving inside. The windows rattled and the front door slammed shut with a deafening bang. But it wasn't just the noise that terrified me. It was the feeling that the cabin itself was alive, shifting and twisting as if it were waking up from some ancient slumber. "We need to get to the car," Sarah cried, pulling on my arm. "Wait!" Jack shouted, panic written all over his face. "Emily's still inside." I whipped around, realizing she wasn't with us. The cold seized my chest as I saw her. Emily was standing just outside the doorway, staring back into the cabin like she was in a trance. "Emily!" Jack screamed, running toward her. Before we could stop him, he grabbed her arm and yanked her away from the door. But the instant he touched her, the ground cracked beneath them both. A jagged line splitting the earth open, and a thick, black mist began pouring out, swirling around their feet like it was alive. The shadow was there again, standing just inside the doorway, watching, waiting. Emily's head snapped toward us, her eyes wide with terror, her voice trembling. "It won't let me leave!" Jack screamed her name again, pulling her harder, but the mist wrapped around her legs, pulling her back like invisible chains. The more Jack tried, the more the mist tightened its grip, dragging her toward the cabin. I ran to help, adrenaline giving me a burst of strength. Sarah was screaming, but I couldn't focus on anything but Emily's terrified face. I grabbed her other arm, trying to pull her free, but whatever had her was stronger, too strong. The mist was alive, writhing and slithering up her body, pulling her into the cabin's hungry jaws. Then, with a horrifying crack, the ground beneath her split open entirely, swallowing her into the darkness below. Jack screamed her name, diving forward, but I yanked him back just as the earth sealed itself shut, leaving nothing but a jagged scar where Emily had stood moments before. "We have to go," I yelled, grabbing Jack and pulling him to his feet. He was crying, screaming for Emily, but there was no time. The shadow moved again, stepping out of the cabin, its hollow eyes fixed on us. We bolted to the car, our hearts pounding as the cold air bit at our skin. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking, but finally the engine roared to life. We tore out of the driveway, the old SUV skidding on the gravel as we sped away from that cursed cabin. In the rearview mirror, I saw it, the cabin, standing still in the moonlight, as if nothing had happened. But as the headlights faded, the door creaked open again, and the shadowy figure stepped out, watching us as we disappeared into the night. Jack was sobbing in the back seat, and Sarah sat frozen beside me, staring ahead with wide, terrified eyes. We didn't speak the entire drive down the mountain. There was nothing to say. By the time we made it to the nearest town, it was morning. Exhausted and shaken, we pulled into a gas station trying to collect ourselves. Jack was inconsolable, still muttering Emily's name. I felt sick, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what had happened. But no matter how hard I tried, I knew no one would believe the truth. So we came up with a story. When the police arrived, we told them Emily had run off into the woods after a fight with Jack. We said she'd been drinking, that maybe she got lost or injured. It wasn't hard to convince them. The cabin was old, remote, and the forest surrounding it was vast and treacherous. People went missing in places like that all the time. Jack hated the idea, but there was no other choice. "She's gone," I whispered to him, pulling him aside. "No one's going to believe us if we tell them what really happened. The shadow, the cabin. They'll think we're insane." He wanted to tell the truth, but the truth was too impossible, too terrifying. So we lied. The search parties went into the woods for days, but they never found a trace of Emily. Not a footprint, not a piece of clothing, nothing. It was as if she had vanished without a trace. In the official report, Emily was listed as a missing person, presumed to have wandered too far into the forest, lost to the wilderness. But we knew the truth. We knew what had really happened. The cabin. It took her, and it wasn't done. I haven't been able to sleep properly since that night. Jack left town a few weeks later, moving somewhere far away to escape the memories. Sarah and I broke up not long after. She couldn't handle the weight of the secret, and honestly, neither could I. But sometimes late at night, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the creak of that door and the hollow, endless eyes of the shadow that followed us. It's a sound and a sight that I'll never escape. We might have escaped that night, but I don't think we'll ever truly be free.